Good afternoon and welcome to the Queenie Quilt Studio. It is day 11 of 100 days of sewing and it is March the 4th, 2021. And today we're going to talk a little bit about paper piecing. So I've got two foundation paper piecing samples behind me. The first one is by Violet Craft and this is her elephant. And the second, oops, I should go the other way, is from Quiltworks and it is Island Sunrise. So both of these are good examples of current available commercial patterns for paper piecing. But there are only two of the many different types of paper piece patterns. A lot of people get really confused about paper piecing because there seems to be so many different types and they sort of go by different names. So I just wanted to quickly go through a couple of things to keep in mind when you buy a pattern. So when you buy something like the elephant from Violet Craft, or I'm getting ready to get started on this Peacock Abstractions pattern from Violet Craft, there's things you need to know. So these patterns specifically have basically a master pattern. So there's a master set of sheets in here that tell you exactly what to do, right? And in this case, they are printed front and back. So when you open them, they're front and back printed, which means you need to do some preparation before you ever can start your project. So in the case of this one, you need to make a certain number of copies. You need to run out to Kinko's, make sure that they're printed only one piece to a page. And in the case of the one I'm doing, I needed to create multiples of some pages, but singles of others. So things to think about. You've got, in addition to the cost of your pattern itself, you will need to get things printed, right? You can't create the quilt that's on that picture without all of those components. So make sure you look at those instructions very closely before you actually show up at class. So that's our first piece of paper piecing. Now in this case, there are some of these blocks that you create multiples of. So these feather blocks are very similar. There's a couple different versions, but you make multiples of a couple of those different versions. And as a result, you make the pattern. In this case, the case of the elephant that I did last summer, you have a mirror. So you have the regular side and you have the mirrored side. So if you look up here, look at this little section here, that has a mirrored section right there, right? But not every section in this quilt has a mirror. So the trunk obviously doesn't have a mirror because an elephant only has one trunk. So those are things you need to think about and plan for when you are creating your design for that quilt. Now, other types of paper piecing that you will see. So this is my Pineapple Crazy, right? So these are the blocks for my Pineapple Crazy block. This was in a book, right? So in that book, she has you make a certain number of copies. It's important when you go make those copies that they are all the same size. Now, it does not matter for this quilt if they are the size of the book, as long as they are the same size as one another, right? So if you make 225 of these blocks and they're 5 1/16, as opposed to 5 1/8, it's not going to make that much difference because you're going to sew them together in squares and then into rows and whatnot. And so they will come out okay. However, if you were to do that with this pattern, be off by 1/4 of a percentage point, 1/2 of a percentage point when they made those copies for you, or you made them on your home computer, your blocks will not fit together because they're not square. They're all kinds of funny shapes. And when you put all those angles together, if it isn't exact, it's going to show up in your piecing. So again, something to think about when you go make your copies. Make sure that you're making a true to size copy, an actual size copy. And she actually gives you really good instructions in her instructions on how to make sure that that printed 1-inch square is actually 1 inch. All right, so the other ways that you can buy paper piecing patterns, right? So this is technically paper piecing. This is English paper piecing, which is a totally different type of paper piecing. This is a wrap and flip method. So you wrap and flip your fabric around various little shapes. So this one happens to be from Sue Daly and their little tiny Dresdens. But it has the Dresdens, it has the circles that go in the middle. I think it has another couple of shapes in here. Anyway, so it's important to make sure you know what you're ordering before you order them. I do English paper piecing, not a lot. I don't love handwork. I used to love handwork, but I don't anymore. I just don't have enough time. My problem is I really love to do big projects. I love big full-size quilts. And with these little pieces, it just takes so long. So anyway, the other way that you might be doing paper piecing is you might have papers like this. So this paper, if you look at it really close, I don't know if I'll be able to get it close enough for everyone to look. I actually sketched the original design. Just a ruler. It was actually done on regular gridded paper, and then I ran to Kinko's and made 75 copies. So you can see my lines cross over. There aren't all kinds of things because I really was just looking for a specific shape to make something. So you can draw them yourself. The other way that they come sort of routinely is where your papers are already printed. So this is a QuiltWorks pattern. I do lots of Judy Niemeyer QuiltWorks stuff. I'm a certified instructor for her. And her patterns come a little bit differently. They come with your papers already printed. So in this case, they're printed, I'm just gonna open this one, on newsprint. It's usually 24 by 36 inches wide. So it's, you know, and there's a couple of sheets. You can have duplicate sheets. In this case, I think there's a couple of this NP 742, and then there's TP 554. So those numbers are identifier numbers to QuiltWorks, so that if you need a replacement piece of paper, if you cut one accidentally, if you mess up, whatever, you can call and request an additional sheet of paper. You can also buy replacement papers. So let's say you made this for your niece and your brother calls and says, oh, I'm having a son as well. Oh, I need to make another one. You can call it, instead of buying the whole pattern, you can buy just a set of replacement papers and remake using the same pattern and just a set of replacement papers. So it gives you lots of options in that respect. And for some of them, you don't even have to call and ask. They have replacement papers just available on the website for a lot of their popular, smaller designs. So those are the different ways that paper piecing papers come. Each of them has its own quirks. Each of them has their own requirements. So when it comes to a QuiltWorks pattern, they're fairly easy to know what you need from a fabric perspective, because it literally tells you on the back for each location how much fabric you need. So those are very straightforward. But for some of the other ones, like Pineapple Crazy, you get an estimate in your pattern about how much fabric you need, so that if you started from scratch, assuming you had no scraps and weren't using the things that you already have on hand, about how much fabric you would need. But it's not going to be precise. It's not going to tell you exactly how much of each color. And realistically, they don't break them down into every single fabric in every round. They really just break it down into lights and darks. And so you get kind of a total yardage measurement required. On ones like these where you come up with them yourself, it's all up to you. Do whatever you want. But you really have zero guidance in terms of how much fabric you need, how you actually piece them or strip them. And realistically, you can make dozens of patterns using just this pattern, in the way that you lay them out, in the way that you set up your color schemes. So I've actually done this one 3 different times. I did one that's in rainbows, where this kite shape was in colors, in strip, so they were, 16 or 18 strips of purple. And I put 4 purple ones together to make a purple star. And then I made an orange star and a yellow star and a green star and a purple, so I made a bunch of different colored stars. And then all of this was black and white prints. So primarily white with small black, but very scrappy. I've also seen this same thing done with just 3 pieces of fabric, right? So 1 color and 2 backgrounds, or 1 background and 2 colors, which a lot of people will associate as the traditional spider web. So there are tons of ways to use these and get a totally different effect. When it comes to these, you can go all kinds of ways. You can get on Brimfield Awakening's website, and first of all, they have hundreds of different kits that make totally different shapes. They have honeycombs and triangles and hexagons and octagons and pentagons, and I'm sure there's a decagon. And when you put them together, they make even more exciting shapes. So these are sort of endless. Whatever personality you can come up with, you can pretty much make in these. And from a paper piecing, or from an English paper piecing perspective, there are tons of websites out there that have custom ones. So Crafty Geese is one of my favorite, where I got all my Harry Potter characters. And so I have a set of these that are actually Harry Potter characters. Now those are a little different. You actually cut the shapes out on cardstock rather than buy them from existing shapes. But you basically have all the characters available. And when it comes to ones like these, patterns like this, well, it tells you a yardage item on the back, right? What it doesn't give you is exactly how to cut them so that you can be extremely precise and not have a lot of waste. Now, in almost all paper piecing, there's going to be waste. Unless you're doing a scrap project and you're using all the stuff that was already waste from another project, there will be waste, because the shapes that we need, and the reason we piece these via paper, is because these are shapes that I cannot get in a traditional piecing method. If I tried to measure that and figure out what that piece would look like, I'll drive myself insane trying to cut a piece that's that size and shape, plus a 1/4 inch on the right and left to get the right size that goes up to the ankle. There's just no way I could calculate that and get a finished product that I like. So you basically piece on paper because you can get exactly what you want. So basically anything you can draw, you can piece. So that's how a lot of these start. They start with a drawing that they then break into some type of a straight line version of that picture. And then they color it so that you get the look you want, so that you can see the shapes, get the definition, see that you have a trunk here and a face and some tusks and a tail and whatnot. So that's really the secret to all of those, is to get those values correct. So that you see the circles, right? So if you look at this quilt, if I were to open it up, you'll find that there are primary blocks and secondary blocks. So blocks that are the exact reverse of one another. Mine kind of don't match, but this one with the purple, the dark purple outside and the light purple inside, has a friend. That's the reverse, that has this light purple on the outside and on the very inside, and this dark purple here. So, there are tons of ways that designers use fabrics efficiently to make these shapes. And there are lots of ways to cut them efficiently and piece them efficiently so that you're not wasting fabric. But when it comes to paper piecing, there's just always going to be waste, which is why a lot of us paper piecers do lots of scrap projects, because we love fabric and we hate to see it thrown away. We hate to see it not be used, especially when you're paying what we are today. We're paying, in some cases, $15, $16 a yard, and that's just here in the continental US. you go to some of the outliers or go over, you know, I lived in England for about 5 years, about 15 years ago, and fabric was already $20 a yard there. Well, it's $20 a meter, but same difference. For that 3 inches, it's not worth that much of a difference. So, you know, it's important for lots of us that we are efficient with our fabric use, that we use everything, whether we're making, you know, our scraps into dog beds or into other quilts or into whatever, that we use them efficiently and effectively, so that yes, we get the finished product that we want, but also that we've used every inch of that fabric that we spent so much money on to make something beautiful. So those are just, that's an intro to paper piecing. Tomorrow, I'm going to teach you how to cut out this one, right? And then how to assemble it, so that you know how to do those on point diamonds. On point diamonds are a trademark for Judy Niemeyer. They are in tons of her quilts. They're all sort of the same and all a little bit different. So I'm going to teach you the tricks of how to assemble them and how to read the pattern so they really make sense. So that's it for today in this intro to paper piecing. But we'll see you tomorrow to talk about how to prepare your papers and how to prepare your fabric. All right, have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow.